For those of you watching and not just listening, you see that I am here with my baby boy, Koa, which brings me to talk about today's conversation, which was all about boyhood, being a boy mom to, little ones, having conversations surrounding what it means to squash toxic masculinity in this day and age, and raise empathetic, emotionally intelligent, respectful boys, right? I'm still no expert. I have some ways to go with my little one. As everyone else who follows me knows, I have 2 girls. This is my only boy, and some things keep me up at night worrying about raising a boy in this day and age and, making sure that he is the kind of man that this world needs. And there's so much importance in being intentional, right? And not just assuming that because they're boys, they require less. I think that's a fallacy. We're all complex little humans with the desire to be seen and understood and valued. There's this harmful narrative surrounding boys that they're just disruptive and, that's just the way they are and they don't require much and boys will be boys, and that's just not true. This led me to remember something I wanted to ask my guest, which my ADHD brain completely blanked at the moment when I wanted to ask her, right? But if any of you have thought about this and have any insights into this, please DM me. Any of you, including men, right? Because this is a conversation about boys and men, which very much have to do with us mothers who are raising future men, right? Little boys. But yeah, I'm always open to hearing insight from fathers and from men who've been raised by women and have, some kind of, they have notes maybe. But here's what I wanted to kind of unpack: this notion of how men's value has somehow been reduced to simply being a provider. And I don't know if this is every man's excuse. I feel like some men feel purpose in that and they feel, valued in that. And perhaps there's also a level of pressure that is a little bit harmful, right? If any person's value is reduced to just one thing that they're valued for, I think anyone's going to feel a little bit like unappreciated or that's all that they're worth. And I think reframing this conversation surrounding boys and men and how just like girls and women, they deserve as much treatment of their internal world, right? That they are complex and capable and able and loving, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's not feminine or, masculine to be any which way, right? Being authentic, being vulnerable is powerful. And that goes for men and women. And so we have to stop teaching boys that being vulnerable and showing emotion and showing up for who they are authentically and having a soft side is not a weakness. And it's should be encouraged more, right? Anyway, Payal, I didn't ask you this, but if you're watching our episode and listen to this, I will be sliding into your DM now to tell you that I remembered what I was going to tell you earlier. But anyway, Payal Desai, she is known as Payal for Style on Instagram and TikTok, is the creator of the viral Dusty Sun series, which challenges traditional gender roles by showcasing the lessons she teaches her own sons. The series has earned millions of likes and caught the attention of outlets including The Tom Ron Hall Show on ABC, HuffPost, Parents, Business Insider, and more. A former educator with 16 years in the classroom, Payal now brings her teaching expertise to work as a full-time content creator. Beyond her viral content, she hosts a weekly webinar, Being a Boy Mom, offering parents an intimate space to reflect on the challenges and hopes of raising boys today. I hope you guys enjoy the show. Hi everyone, and hi Payal. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I've been following you for a while, and I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As per our new tradition on the podcast this season, we start by asking parents one unapparent truth of parenting for you.
For me, I did not realize how much of my own healing was going to play a role in me being a mom. I always thought that, like, when it came to motherhood, I was going to be pouring into my children and giving to them. But what I've learned is that I've had to give back to myself and pour into myself in order to show up for them. And that has required a lot of my own healing. So whether that's therapy, my sobriety, a lot of things have played into that for me to be the mom that I am.
Mm-hmm. And we hear so much the term reparenting, right? And I don't think we feel the weight of that until we experience it, right? In motherhood, there's nothing quite like motherhood to show us, I don't want to say flaws, but in a way, like how much healing we have yet to do and how much reparenting goes into the work of parenting, right? And so, as you say, healing is so much, it's like a catalyst for your growth, right? And in all senses, when you have children, because it feels that much more pressing and important, right?
Absolutely.
Because the responsibility of raising children is a great one.
Yeah. And, they say that, like, you look in the mirror and you kind of start to see your own toxic traits because they come out in your children. Right. And then you're like, oh, wait, I need to correct that because parenting is so much modeling. They're watching everything that we do, say, how we interact with others. And when you realize, like, you're kind of on the spotlight and your children are watching everything, then you need to kind of align to that.
Correct. Yeah. So I want to talk about so many things with you today, but to kick things off, I want to start with your journey, right? Not just as a content creator, but as a mom who's chosen to bring her parenting philosophy to the public stage, right? So as I understand it, you created the Dusty Sun trend. So what inspired you to create that series, and did you expect it to resonate the way it has?
So I can't take full credit for creating the trend because the way that the trend was appearing online was something that I wanted to shift. So I shifted the narrative. But I was, seeing this trend come up, and really what it looked like was moms teaching their sons to cook. It would be like teaching my son to cook so that your dusty daughter's Stouffer's lasagna doesn't impress him. And that's the way that the trend, the music, the stare, all of that was coming up. And I was just like, we're supposed to be the generation that breaks these cycles, right? We get to do things differently. And here I see my peers, moms my age, putting out this message on social media. And I was like, this does not sit well with me. And I was one that, like, on content, like, I was always jumping on different trends. And my sister also has a son, and I sent it to her, and I was like, I want to do this trend, but I cannot get on board with this messaging. And she was the one. She gave me, like, the first content idea, and she was like, teach your son to clean up after himself so that your daughter doesn't have to spend her lifetime catering to a man. Mm-hmm. And so I posted it. Yeah. And it went, like, mega viral. And I was not expecting that. I was like, I thought it would resonate. But the fact that it resonated so deeply, not just with moms raising boys, but also just with women in general across the world. And so I thought to myself, like, there's something here, as we're raising our boys in our home and continuously giving them the skills and the tools to what we think to be successful. Why don't we share aspects of that? Because perhaps it is different than previous generations, I feel. And so we started doing a bunch of different videos teaching the boys all these different things, whether it was like, picking up like the domestic tasks around the house to have, like, more of a equitable domestic life, right? To be able to take care of themselves, or also the social emotional aspect. And the videos really resonated.
I mean, I can see why, right? We're living in times where I think there's a little more awareness than previous generations about the toxic masculinity that we see. And also, sadly, I've from what I've been seeing, there's a bit of a rise in another aspect of, like, a new age type of toxic masculinity. Like, I think back to the series Adolescence. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
And I bought I was gifted the book Boy Mom, which I think I saw that you also read, and you had
Ruth Whipman.
Yes, you had her on which is amazing. I want to talk about that too. But how much of your upbringing, how much of like these new societal norms, how much of this new age toxic masculinity has informed your approach to parenting?
Yeah, well, our South Asian culture is very rooted in patriarchy, as I've come to find many cultures are. And so I grew up with a lot of those structures in place. And I did not expect to be a mother of boys, which sounds ridiculous because you really have no control over that. But I did experience gender disappointment with both of my boys. I had just kind of expected that I was going to have daughters who were going to be like my little clones and, my twins.
Little feminists changing the world.
Yes, exactly. But, in my journey, I've come to realize that a lot of what I believed previously about boys has been debunked. And I taught for 16 years, and this should have been like I did experience, boys that they're on a spectrum. There are a range of different types of personalities and beings, and there's no generalization to place on boys or no stamp to put on them. However, when I was pregnant with both of my boys, I still had gender disappointment because I felt an inadequacy of how was I going to raise boys, and was I going to be able to cultivate relationships with them. And that has all come into my life, I think, for a reason, because I have beautiful relationships with both of my boys. And so I've been able to understand that.
I mean, that's beautiful. And I think you also spoke to, at least in my experience, a lot of my fears in becoming a boy mom came around that sense of inadequacy, or like, how do I ensure that I am raising, boys that are fit for the women I want to also raise, right?
Yeah.
That kind of narrative also about, because you hear that a lot. I don't know in just Hispanic culture, but I don't know in probably other cultures, you hear a lot that boys are easier to raise. And I think that's part of the problem, that we've kind of ignored so many of boys' needs, their emotional needs, their just in general. And that's, I think, part of the rise in this new age, as I say, toxic masculinity, but also years past, generations past. And I'm starting out my journey because I have a baby boy, right? And these were my fears in becoming a boy mom, right? I was always in my head, like, I'm a girl mom because I had two girls. And as you say, it's not something you can't control, but I had already rooted my identity in being a girl mom. And then also being a little bit afraid of what it would mean to be a boy mom and how much more responsibility that would put on me as a mom to like do a good job, and not knowing anything about raising boys. Is there anything that you can say about that or speak to, those fears that I'm guessing other women have those same fears and concerns?
Well, it's because it's so normalized to think that boys are easier.
Yeah.
But when you actually interact with boys and allow them to be who they are, as I did in my classroom, I saw that the boys require emotional development, and they want to have deep friendships, and they want to connect. And so if they have all of these needs, then how are they easier?
Right.
And so if we are able to at least acknowledge that about boys, then no, it's not easier. In what way?
Right.
If we just say that, okay, boys will be boys, and allow them to, like, it's gender essentializing language where we decide that what we observe generalizes and is the truth for both boys and girls. And it's really harmful to talk about anybody that way.
Right. Because they're complex beings, just like you and I are, right?
They're deeply relational. And so if that's the case, then how can we say that they're easier? If you think that they're easier, you're probably not doing something, like you're missing it. Right.
And so much of your, your work and your advocacy on social media is just like challenging these gender norms, right? And the boys will be boys trope, which you just spoke about. And so, what pressures do you feel, whether internally or externally, when it comes to raising good men? Because I felt that pressure. And then furthermore, what does it mean to you to raise gentle, introspective, emotionally aware boys?
Yeah. So the pressures, I think, I get what's the word I'm looking for? I get told online that, my content is man hating. And I disagree completely. My content is man loving. I'm trying to raise boys who are able to thrive in this world and giving them things that I think that generations beyond us have not given boys, traditionally speaking. So I think that, our lives are only as rich as the relationships that we have. And in order to have deep connections and relationships, we need to be vulnerable. And so vulnerability is a superpower. If I'm able to give my boys that, and what does that require? Allowing them to lean into who they are and also be supported in a safe environment. So if I can give them that, then they can thrive. And I truly believe that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you said it. I feel like there's so much power in authenticity and vulnerability. And why is it that we find that so many men nowadays can't express themselves emotionally, right? There's so much emotionally unavailable men out there. And as anyone who's dated in the past decade or more has come to find out, right? And why should it be refreshing to find an emotionally available man when that should be the norm, right? And and not to say that, girls and women haven't had some sort of trauma where they are also not emotionally available, but as a whole, toxic masculinity, I feel has been ignored or justified as boys will be boys, as you say. And so much of the work that we as moms do, but also dads, right? What role do you find your partner has in raising these emotionally, aware and healthy boys?
It's the modeling. Yeah. It's him being in touch with his own emotions, being able to use language to communicate his emotions, and being calm. We have to be the calm for our children, for our boys when we're angry, for a man to be able to sit with that anger and find healthy ways to release it, and for a boy to watch that is very, very powerful. And so that's certainly the role that he plays in modeling, how he leans into his own emotions and is able to communicate the way that he treats other people, the way that he handles rejection. As my 9-year-old is getting older, I've seen that my husband shares a lot with him. And I think that that's how you sometimes teach empathy, by allowing your kids to see you as a human being, and by allowing your children to see that you are human, you make mistakes, you face rejection. There is hardship in your life, but how are you facing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like other than in really practical day-to-day ways, the role my husband has in our children's upbringing is so huge, especially in, as you say, the modeling. The way he loves me will inform the way I think my daughters will know how to value themselves, but also eventually my son will know, what's healthy love and what's being vulnerable. And I don't know, I grew up with a brother as well, and he has 2 sisters, and I think he's, I'm biased, but I think he's just one of the best guys out there, right? He's emotionally intelligent and he's aware of the needs. And I don't know, it's I can't even place what I'm trying to say fully, because there's so much more complexity into who they are as men, as people. But they've both grown up with sisters, right? I don't think that's a coincidence. And at the same time, it's okay, even if you don't have sisters, how do we ensure, as parents, that this is the way that they're raised? In their cases, they didn't have a choice. They had sisters, they were going to be this kind of men. But obviously, my mom was very intentional. But yeah, I wanted to get to, if language to me is really important, right? I feel like the way we talk about people in general is so important, because our children are listening to everything we say. Is there any way that you can share with us specifically that you are challenging some of these gender norms, whether, in how you speak, the language you use, or any other teachings that you can share with us?
Yeah, it's actually so simple. It's boys can.
Mm-hmm.
And that can manifest in many different ways. I'll give you an example. My younger son likes to paint his nails, and he enjoys doing that. Part of it might be because of his connection to me, and he sees me doing it. But I think that that like has grown into his own interest, because it's now been a couple of years where he continues to now want to come to the salon with me. I'm like, I've created a monster over here. But he enjoys doing that. My older son, not interested. He's like, good for you, but not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about boys can paint their nails. Not all boys do, but boys can. Boys don't always wear a dress, but they can. Boys don't always play flag football, but they can. So this language allows them to have flexibility in their definition of masculinity and their definition of what it means to be a boy. Mm-hmm. So for my older son, if he comes across a boy his age in school who has painted nails or is doing something that is outside of that traditional role of being a boy, he's like, okay.
Accepting.
Mm-hmm. And if we can teach our boys to be accepting, it's not forcing them to be any which way, but to be accepting of themselves and of others. Mm-hmm. I think that is really powerful.
That's huge. And as you said, I think a lot of people want to misconstrue and take it as like, oh, stop forcing boys to do this or that, right? And it's beautiful how you say it's allowing them to be who they are authentically. And we're not pushing that on anyone, right? If you don't like it, you have the right not to like it, mm-hmm. and just as if you do like it, you have every right to like it, right?
It's just giving boys permission.
Yeah.
And
not boxing them in, right?
Exactly, to these rules. What I learned as a mom of boys, but then also teaching in the classroom, is that we have this like, I think where we're coming from and what I grew up with is that girls were given permission to be and do anything. And in fact, that was very empowering. It continues to be. If I had a daughter, I would tell her, you can be and do anything. Mm-hmm. In the same respect, we've kept boys boxed in to these rules that you can only be this, this, and this. And so I think that's so harmful. Mm-hmm. In one way, we give girls this empowering message to, the sky's the limit and break out of the box. And that's actually celebrated. But for boys, they don't have the permission to do that. And even if we do allow them to in our homes, which I do, I know that when they go into school and they are faced with peers, a lot of those rules are still going to play a role, and they're going to have to find a way to navigate that. And I saw that with boys that I was teaching, in a group setting. It's like that herd mentality, and there's a lot of peer pressure, and there's a lot of pressure of how to be as a boy. But if you got them one-on-one, they did want to connect, and they did want to be vulnerable, and they did have all of the skills to connect and have a relationship. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's very telling.
Hey, just popping in to say thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts would mean the world. It helps us so much, and as a bonus, you'll also get a chance to win some exclusive merch like this sweatshirt I'm wearing. Now, back to the episode. And I know it's hard in a school setting, right, to have that one-on-one interactions, as you say, but is there anything that you can speak to in terms of what schools get wrong or right in terms of, supporting boys grow beyond their stereotypes?
Yeah, there are schools that I've taught at that have, strong social emotional learning programs. And really what you need is adults who are willing to give boys space. And so, yes, their one-on-one is hard, but it's also very manageable. So if you've got educators who see past the generalizations and understand that every behavior is rooted in something, right? That behavior is coming from something. And so if you can dig into that and be able to connect with that person, then like you're able to get to sometimes the root of it, or at least build like a safe environment for that child. And so I know that in public education, there are so many pressures and it is very hard. But when we've got educators who have that mindset and even have that professional development or that training about boys and girls, right, then we have like more programs in place to support.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much I guess we as parents can do from the outside when kids go to school. And so many of, I would say probably our fears are rooted in what they're going to experience when they go out into the world, right? I mean, let's not even get into everything going on like with school shootings and all of that. That's like a really, really real fear here. But when it comes to like peer pressure and social pressure and like bullying and all of that, you know, it's, I don't know, it's almost like, can my heart take it if my child is bullied for something, right? And I ask you, I mean, I love and I admire how open and authentic you are, you know, and honest online. Are there any moments that feel like maybe you have to, I don't know, draw boundaries or like hold back, I don't know, for the sake of your family?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes when content goes to the other side of the internet and it just becomes ruthless with the comments, I'll just turn them off. And that's my way of protecting myself. And just because the conversation is no longer productive when the comments are taken over by people who are not ready to receive the message, is what I'll say, because I think that there's a lot of positivity. Like the reason why I resigned from teaching and the reason why I went full time as a content creator is because I saw myself using my skills as an educator to teach in a classroom that now doesn't have bounds or walls. And the community has been amazing. You know, it's brought me to opportunities like this to connect with you. But there's another side to it. There's a lot of people who are not ready for the message and feel that it is a worthless message, you know, that I have no reason to be talking about raising boys, and that it's like I'll get the comment that like you have no business talking about masculinity. And I've gotten that often, like you have no business, because as a woman, I have no business talking about masculinity. Well, I'm raising 2 boys, so I have plenty of business talking about masculinity. Also, men have made it their business to talk about women, our bodies, and like laws are on our bodies. Therefore, I will talk about masculinity as much as I would like to.
The audacity. Yes. I mean, it is seriously a double standard. But I mean, we know there's just so much social and political, you know, discourse around all of this. And I know a lot of the hate I get on my social media is don't talk about politics. Like, I think partly is the fact that I'm a woman. Like, how dare you be a woman and talk about politics when everything is politicized when it comes to our well-being and our children's well-being. So excuse me if I care about, you know, myself and others and the future. And when you put things like policy that's going to affect our lives one way or another, it matters. Politics matter, right? But, you know, there's so much we want to shield our kids from and we want to also prepare them for. And a lot of, you know, I guess I try not to project my fears and I want to be proactive. And but at the end of the day, I question myself. Am I doing things right? You know, are my children going to learn the message I want them to learn? Are they going to, you know, one day look back and be like, wow, my mom was awesome. Or like, man, did I scar them? You know, so there's so many doubts and questions. I think that goes for probably every parent because we won't know the you know, the fruits of what we, you know, raise until probably much later down the line. Is there something that you know, want your children to look back on and one day say from the way they were raised?
I think above all, I want them to look back and say, I felt valued and that I felt loved and heard. And a lot of times, you know, we dismiss kids and we don't see them as whole people, but they are, and their thoughts and their opinions matter. And I think that is where my experience as an educator meets my now role as a mother. And I resigned a year ago, so this last year has been sort of like bridging the gap and really leaning into how I was as a teacher, and now like it's really the same as how I operate as a mom too. And it's giving them that sense of value and worth. And it means, using things like words like, what do you think about that? Just giving your kids space to answer that, because we care what they think. And so often kids feel like nobody cares, and how lonely and how isolating to feel that way. I oftentimes have to, remind my husband when he's hard on them, especially my 9-year-old, when he's hard on him. I'm like, when you were 9, were you doing all the things you're asking of him? Like, our expectations of him are just because he's the older brother, right? Like, you have this set of expectations and it's actually unrealistic. And we had this moment on vacation where we had to sort of like remind my older son about showering and like all the parts to hygiene. It was a hygiene talk. And my husband was like, "You're 9 years old. You should know." And I was like, time out. You told me when you were a kid, your mom had to be on you about brushing your teeth because you wouldn't do it otherwise. Remember that. And he was like, "Oh my God, you're right. I forget he's just a kid and that I have to give him space to be a kid."
I think that happens to all of us. And I think there's a reason there's an older sibling wound, an older child wound, because naturally we're not the same parents with every child, right? We're first-time parents with our oldest, and for better or for worse, they carry, whatever mistakes or lessons or teachings. And also, as you say, the expectations somehow become higher, right? I'm a younger sibling, and I cannot speak from personal experience, but I have an older sister who I know feels this way. And my older daughter, I'm so like, sometimes I have to stop myself and be like, she's only 4.5, and she wants to act like she's older, and she wants to be helpful, and she wants to, be the responsible one. It's almost like it's a role she's really embraced. She loves being the older sister. And I think in as much as I can just encourage that it's something that it's really special and unique to be the older sibling to your 2 little siblings, right? It's something that I know she naturally is drawn to, but also kind of like halt myself when I'm like expecting too much of her. I talked to my therapist about this because sometimes I have this mom guilt. I'm like, oh, was I too hard on her? She's only 4. And also, I also try to think of, my sister and how she might maybe felt as an older sibling and all of the, whatever trauma she could have from that. And I'm the youngest, so obviously you got away with a lot more than we did. That's a different conversation. But my therapist, says that while, yes, my concerns are very valid and it's a good thing to be aware of as a parent, it's also the narrative and how we, empower them to take on the role of older sibling, and same with middle child or same with the youngest. And as in a family, we all have, roles, and not to, expect a lot of them, but for them to themselves feel like this is a really cool role that I have and I can embrace that versus feel like a victim of it, right? And I think that was a beautiful way to frame that, and also sort of gave me a little bit of relief in my mom guilt. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I reframe it? How do I manage my expectations and all of that? And so that reminded me of that. That wasn't even part of what I was thinking of talking about.
I'm a youngest too. Okay. I have 2 older sisters, so I relate with that, dynamic. But I think there's a difference of expecting something of your child and then empowering them to do it, and so it's striking the balance between that.
Correct. That is, balances are what it's all about, but they're so hard to strike, right? So any other particular values, right, that you hope that your kids will carry into adulthood and maybe into fatherhood if they decide to become fathers?
Empathy. I feel like empathy is lost on so many, specifically at this moment. But truly, it's being able to step into somebody else's shoes and see the world from their vantage point. It's about teaching boys that you will carry privilege just due to your gender. You have privilege in so many different ways, but how do you use that privilege to also be able to recognize when you have privilege, there is somebody who's disadvantaged, and to be cognizant of that. And that's a really big thing to teach, right? But it starts with empathy at the most basic level of being able to understand that I have something somebody doesn't, and I'm going to either be able to help them with that, or be able to recognize that, or be able to listen to them and to listen more than you speak, you know?
Yeah. I remember hearing someone say that, in their younger years, they thought that they had to be, the loudest person in the room or the one who spoke the most. But then he realized that, with maturity and in time, that the smartest, people were the ones actually like silent because they're listening and learning and, taking in, and they don't feel the need to like be heard unless it was, something really important to be said.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if it's undervalued, but listening is such an important skill set, and it informs on also your empathy because you're taking the time to listen to another person's point of view, to their emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that's something really valuable also to be said. I feel like there's so much,
I know.
so much we could be talking about and continue to talk about. And a lot of that heaviness from the big responsibility, to raise kids, especially within this political climate, is vast, especially with boys nowadays, and I have so many questions and concerns, which I'm going to, as my son grows, I will continue to talk to you. But, what gives you hope right now in the midst of all of this, either in your own family or in the broader parenting community?
I think that, the community that I have online of women, men as well, who are like-minded in their parenting journey. And we have such great conversations about what we want to be and what we want to do for our boys. And when I focus on that, I know that I'm not the only one who's parenting like this, that there are others who are trying to instill the same values. And so that's got to mean something. And so that does bring me hope. Another thing is, when you see the fruits of your labor, when you have moments where your children reflect the things that you've been teaching, and those are such bright spots, and those just continuously empower. Like I see it now when, I just have these moments where especially my 9-year-old, who's kind of getting more and more into that social space of, he will be peer pressured, or there will be that, those rules of being a boy that are in place, and he pushes back on them, even though he is more of that like boy traditionally speaking. He's my athlete and his interests are more traditional boy interests, but he pushes back when he sees something that goes against what we've talked about in our home. That is a bright spot, and that's a moment of hope.
And that reminded me of something that I wanted to bring up when I was talking about adolescence and all of that, right? It's being proactive in your home, right? Letting them have heard, like letting them hear a framework for what is the kind of value system that you want them to carry out into the world, right? Because I feel it's not enough to just be a passively like okay parent where you're like you're physically there, but you're not engaging in conversations that, lead them to have a context for like, oh wait, no, what do I think of this? My value system, has been instilled in me actively, right, at home. Whereas if you go online or hear from someone else something really awful being said, either the way, they're talking about girls and women or whatever it may be, and it's a lot easier, I feel like, to kind of take that at face value when you don't have the pushback in your subconscious or even really presently and like, oh wait, this is not correct. It doesn't feel right inside of me.
True.
And so that's really important because he had a value system to fall back on and be like, I'm pushing back because I know in my heart this is not right, and so that really is a testament to your parenting. So that's awesome.
And it's really having core values as a family that are actually specifically communicated that we have, as I think it's the teacher in me, but we used to have, I used to do this lesson with my students where we would have a value system that we created at the very beginning of the school year. And I do that lesson with my kids. And it is listing out the things that are most important to us and then categorizing them and then creating these values, like what does our family stand for? And it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more to it, but nonetheless, like having really intentional practices in place. Like I do a lot of conversation cards, and connection is key. Like the more that you can talk to your kids and get them talking and be a listener, I mean, there is just so much value in that, and there's so much power in that. And so I pull cards during meal times, and we'll just chat through, and they're social emotional, they're empathy, there's a range of them. But I'll take moments like that and like taking the kids on a walk, but like getting them moving, you'll notice like they'll start to talk, and then they start sharing like so-and-so did this at school and da-da-da-da-da-da. And a lot of times with my son, my older son, he's much more willing to share about friends than he is about himself, but it leads him to then talking about himself.
Okay. So if you listen hard enough, you'll get there.
Yes. And giving space. And I know that parents are under so much pressure and our time is strapped, and I get it. I fully understand that. I'm in the same boat. But when we can really intentionally make time for connection, it pays off.
Yeah. I'm going to pick your brain about all of those activities we can do at mealtime. My oldest is the only fully verbal. My middle one is getting there, so we still have time, I think. So before we wrap up, Payal, I've had such a great time talking with you today. I feel like we could go on forever. But we always carve out space, for our guests to share what, any projects they're working on, and where our listeners can find you.
So my social content is on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, Payal for Style. And I do one-on-one and group sessions called Being a Boy Mom. It's a space where we can be a little bit more open and honest about those fears and inadequacies that we may have raising boys. And so I would invite anyone to join if it resonates.
I will be joining. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Unaparent Podcast, produced by Studio Dama and hosted by me, Katia Lindor. If you like what you heard, subscribe or follow us on social media and tune in as we share deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting.